Essential Progressive Rock Albums, part 852. It's not really 852, I just got no idea of how many I've done. I'm doing a whole ton of these today because people keep saying I witter on for too long, and I do witter on. I'm wittering on now. Even on a short video like this, I'm still wittering on, but I'm going to try and keep on the subject and deliver something like a little progressive rock punch to the audience so that they can, just get a little bit of a taste of Randy, but not have to go on about me getting all philosophical and grumpy, which tends to happen. Right, so Essential Progressive Rock Albums. I've just done the Yes album, which is a massively essential, everyone knows that album. But this album you might not necessarily think of, but I think every progressive rock fan should own a copy of that. Tin Drum by Japan. So Japan are the sort of this band that emerged in the post-punk scene. They're coming out of really like Roxy Music, and at the start they seem like a bit of a carbon copy of Roxy Music. David Sylvian sings a little bit like Brian Ferry, but as they get deeper and deeper, they start to forge their own sound, and they forge their own sound because of the brilliance of the musicians. And each of these musicians, I think, changes the sound of progressive rock. David Sylvian's songwriting gets more and more ethereal and proggy. And this is the key album. It's actually their last album. And so this sort of post-punk band that are slowly getting more and more intense, more and more complex, more and more flowery, in other words, more and more prog, echoing what's happening in the British music scene at that point as the post-punk bands, who really were just an extension of prog, a reaction against it, but still had prog in its DNA, as they start to get all flowery, laying the groundwork for the electronic music and the new romantic music that's going to happen in the 1980s. And this band are definitely championing the new romantic scene. And if you look at the back, they've all got a lot of makeup as they sit there, very postmodern, all looking a bit grumpy, even though they got a record deal and they're having hit records, and they're all really handsome and young and everybody loves them, but they are still grumpy men. And grumpy men, are the staple of rock music. By this album, the songwriting of David Sylvian has become very concise. In fact, Ghosts, when I did my 10 great songs ever written, Ghosts was one of the tracks I chose. But Mick Karn's bass playing, Steve Jansen's drumming, and Richard Barbieri's keyboard playing basically changed the sound of progressive rock. And if you listen to a lot of modern progressive rock bands now, you will hear that sound. I'm playing with a guy called Tim Bonus at the moment, and Tim Bonus is really come out of this post-Japan sound to such an extent that these guys have actually appeared on the album. If you think of a band like Porcupine Tree, they're another band that have come out of this. There is a whole lineage of modern progressive rock that comes out of this album, and this is an essential purchase if you're a progressive rock fan. Now, are you going to get a bunch of pop music? No, you're not. You're going to get a bunch of really strange, funky, electronic weirdness. Richard Barbieri is really exploring the same territory that the electronic pop bands are doing at that certain time. He's really pushing the sounds to the limit. If you listen to Ghosts, and Ghosts is pretty much just a very nice, pretty ballad that David Sylvian had obviously written on an acoustic guitar. And I think if you really put your head in there and try and cut out all the weirdness, you can hear that. But on that, Richard Barbieri, and I believe one of them plays I think it could well be, who is it? Somebody's playing like marimba or something like that, I imagine. It doesn't say. It tells me that Mick Karn's played African flute. I got a feeling it was Steve Jansen that was playing that because there's no drums on it. This really incredible web of beautiful sounds. But Ghosts is not definitive of what this album sounds like. The rest of it is very interesting, twisted grooves that are sort of funky and yet very dry. And this idea of Japan, tin drum, the aesthetic of Japan, the aesthetic of Asia in the East, this is where this really comes, to the fore. We've got tracks like Talking Drum, we've got tracks like Visions of China, Cantonese Boys, Canton. That aesthetic is through this. Whereas the 70s progressive rock bands would often go to India, wouldn't they, for their inspiration? The jazz rock bands would often go to India or Africa. Now we're getting these sort of Eastern Asian, Chinese, Japanese influence. You know, there's an African influence on here. There's also an influence from new wave music, and Talking Heads are exploring a very similar area at this time. This is an essential album. Now I've got to say, for me, this was the last album. I don't know whether being pop stars wasn't for them, but they seem to have got out at the top of their pop success. And David Sylvian then goes on to record a bunch of solo albums, which for me were even more influential. The double album that he made called Gone to Earth, which features a whole host of progressive rock stars, including Robert Fripp, is another absolute masterpiece, an essential album for progressive rock fans. It's got 2 discs on there, one full of these beautiful, lush, incredible songs, incredibly produced. It doesn't sound like the 1980s, it just sounds incredible. And then on side the second disc, you get a whole ton of ambient stuff that he's created with Robert Fripp and various other artists. It's an absolute masterpiece. And for me, the 2 essential albums from this world, because this is more than just Japan, this is a whole world. You know, Porcupine Tree is part of this world. Steven Wilson is part of this world. This is a certain world that exists within progressive rock. But for me, the 2 essential albums would be this and Gone to Earth. And if you're only going to have one, you're going to go and check this, which I believe is the source. This is where it all comes from. What you're looking at is the roots of modern progressive rock. If you like this video, a lot shorter than normal, then stick a like on. If you want to see more, subscribe. If you want to become a patron and support me, and also become a member of the Andy Edwards Club, meet other people that love the same music as you and get a ton of exclusive content, the link's down below. And you can become a free member. There's stuff for the free members as well. It's not as good as the stuff for the members, obviously, but there's still some stuff there. And if you want to support me financially, like give me a little tip, like I'm some sort of digital busker, you know, then you can do that, because I have a PayPal, YouTube tip jar, and the link is down below. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one.